the Atlanta Ripper. He murdered African American females. His murders took place in 1911 to 1912, and the media hardly reported his murders, so the entire public was completely unaware of his killings. The Stone Man, an Indian killer, killed between the years 1985 to 1987. He targeted homeless people. He murdered his victims by beating them with a rock. At the crime scene, all that was found was a big heavy stone, and it was suspected the murderer was acting on spiritual beliefs.
Michael Myers, and for this one, I'm just gonna kind of do a plot summary of the movie Halloween because we didn't have a whole bunch of information about it. On Halloween night of 1963 in Haddonville, Illinois, 16-year-old Michael Myers, dressed in a clown costume and mask, kills his older sister Judith with a kitchen knife at his home. On October 30th, 1978, 21-year-old Michael escaped Smith's Grove Sanitarium, where he had been committed after the murder, and steals a car that was to take him to court, where he was to be sentenced to life imprisonment. Along the way, he kills a mechanic, taking his uniform. He drives home to Haddonfield and steals a white mask from a local store. The next day, Halloween, Michael stalks high school student Laurie Strode after she and Tommy Doyle drop off a key at his former house so her father can sell it. Laurie's friends, Anne Brackett and Linda Van der Klock, dismiss her concerns that she is being followed. Michael's psychiatrist, Dr. Sam Loomis, anticipating Michael's return home, meets with Anne's father, Sheriff Lee Brackett, and watches Michael's house, believing he will show up there. When Anne's boyfriend Paul calls her to come and pick him up, she takes Lindsay Wallace to the Doyle house to spend the night with Laurie and Tommy. After Annie gets into the car, Michael strangles her and slits her throat. While playing hide and seek with Lindsay, Tommy sees Michael carrying Anne's body to the Wallace house, believing he is the boogeyman, tries to tell a skeptical Laurie about what he saw. Later, Linda and her boyfriend Bob enter the Wallace house to have sex. Afterwards, Bob goes downstairs and is killed by Michael. He then poses as Bob in a ghost costume and confronts Linda, who teases him, to no effect. Annoyed, she calls Laurie. Just as Laurie picks up, Michael strangles Linda with the telephone cord. Meanwhile, Loomis discovers his stolen car, confirming his beliefs that Michael is in Haddonfield. He starts patrolling the streets. Becoming suspicious, Laurie goes over to the Wallace house and finds her friends dead in the upstairs bedroom. Michael suddenly appears and slashes her arm. Barely escaping, Laurie retreats to the Doyle house, where she tells Tommy to hide upstairs with Lindsay after he lets her in. Michael gets in through an open window and attacks Laurie, only to be stabbed in the neck with a knitting needle. After he collapses, Laurie goes upstairs and tells Tommy and Lindsay she killed the boogeyman. Tommy says, "You can't kill the boogeyman," as Michael reappears. The kids hide in the bathroom while Laurie opens the balcony door and hides in a bedroom closet. Michael breaks in, but she undoes a metal clothes hanger and stabs him in the eye with it. He drops his knife and she stabs him with it, and he collapses again. Laurie exits the closet and asks the children to go to the neighbor's house and have them call the police. As they leave, Michael gets up again. Loomis sees Tommy and Lindsay flee the house and goes inside to find Michael, attacking Laurie upstairs. Loomis shoots Michael 6 times with the revolver, sending him off the balcony. In shock, Laurie concludes it was the boogeyman, and Loomis replies, "As a matter of fact, it was." Loomis looks over the balcony to see Michael has disappeared. The Axeman of New Orleans. He started his killing spree in 1918. He killed his victims with an axe. He broke into people's houses. The Axeman disappeared on March 10th, 1919, and killed a father and his daughter while fracturing the mother's skull. Thought to kill at least 6 people, though there might be more. At one of them, Mafia was blamed of the killings. Many of the victims were also Italian. The Servant Girl Annihilator. He was nicknamed America's Jack the Ripper. He left a lot of his victims alive and still avoided capture. Many of his murdered women were severely mutilated. 6 of the victims had sharp objects in their ears. He was even credited with magic powers because he was thought to be able to turn himself invisible, and more than 400 men were accused.
Reported to be dead for 2 weeks before the body was dumped. A young victim of the name Edward Andrassy was said to have died from decapitation. The investigators suspected the killer might be a butcher, surgeon, or someone skilled in killing animals. 4 months after the first bodies were found, on a cold Sunday afternoon in January, the howling of a dog led a woman who lived on East 20th Street to make another gruesome discovery. She found the chained animal trying to tear open a basket that was standing near the wall of a factory. Minutes later, after a brief glance again, she told a passing neighbor that the basket contained hams. The neighbors recognized the hams as being a human arm. A burlap bag was pulled from the basket and they discovered a female torso from which the head, the left arm, and lower legs were missing. The police were able to trace the fingerprints of it to a 41-year-old prostitute named Florence Flo Polillo, an overweight and unattractive woman who was well known in the local dives and gin joints. Um, Another one of his victims, the head of a young man was found wrapped in a pair of trousers beneath a bridge. This
The
one, I
Highway of Tears.
believe.
Ramona Wilson left home on a Saturday night in June 1994. Her remains found 10 months later near the local airport. And Tamara Chipman disappeared in 2005, and she is still missing today. Dozens of Canadian women and girls ended up being victims.
The Alphabet Murders. The victims were raped and strangled in Rochester, New York. The girls' last and first names start with the same letter and were dumped in a town with the same letter. Examples are Carmen Collin, who was dumped in Churchill, Michelle Mainza, who was dumped in Macedon, and Wanda Walkowicz, who was dumped in Webster. Three total murders. Joseph Nassau lived in Rochester, New York, committed similar murders in California. Joseph's victims were normally prostitutes. His DNA did not match the samples from the victims in Rochester, unfortunately. Joseph also kept a rape diary that had a victim from the upstate New York area, which is why he was such a big suspect. Okay, hello YouTube. Today we are doing a audio recording of 10 murderers that were never caught. So, number 1, Jack the Ripper. He was reported to have killed at least 5 London female prostitutes in 1988. His main area of killing spree was Whitechapel District in London's East End. He had a habit of stabbing a person's neck and disemboweling them, which if you don't know what disemboweling means, it means pretty much just gutting them. All the murders took place within a mile of each other. Several letters from the killer were sent to the police, taunting them, saying that, oh, you can't catch me, blah, blah, blah. One person that was accused was the famous painter Walter Sickert. He was a Polish migrant and the grandson of Queen Victoria. More than 100 suspects have been named, but none of them have been confirmed. The ladies of the night were subjected to physical attacks that sometimes resulted in death, which pretty much means that nobody cared about prostitutes, pretty much. One of the victims, Emma Smith, was beaten and raped by an object by 4 men, which was common. These crimes were marked by sadistic butchering, suggesting a mind more sociopathic and hateful than most citizens could comprehend. He didn't just kill, he humiliated and mutilated women. His murder suddenly stopped in the fall of 1888, and more than a century later, people are still wondering who and why he did it.
The Zodiac Killer. He was linked to at least 5 murders in Northern Carolina in 1968 and 1969. He taunted a police officer with letters just like Jack the Ripper. The first murder happened on December 20th of 1968 when 17-year-old David Faraday and his 16-year-old girlfriend Betty Lou Jensen were shot to death near their car at a remote spot on Lake Herman Road. On August 1st, 1969, 3 newspaper companies received identical handwritten letters in an envelope without a return address. All the letters included details about the murder that only the murderer could know. A high school teacher cracked the code of the decipher, which began, "I like killing people because it is so much fun." His symbol was a circle with an X in it. Even his fingerprints, the Zodiac Killer, was still impossible to find. He also shot a taxi driver, 29-year-old Paul Stein, in San Francisco. He sent a letter about Stein's murder to San Francisco Chronicle describing the murder and threatening to kill a bus full of children. In 1974, the letters abruptly stopped. In 1963, a shooting of Robert Domingos and Linz Edward near St. Barbara. In 1966, a college student was stabbed to death in Riverside, California, and the Zodiac Killer is still at large today.